You're listening to the VSL Aviation Podcast. I'm your host, Seth Lake. Welcome back. Today's episode kicks off a new series we're calling Checkride Insights. In this series, I sit down with designated pilot examiners from around the country to talk about what they're seeing on check rides, common mistakes, areas where applicants struggle, and what you can do to be better prepared. My first guest is Tom Guillebeau. Tom and I have been DPEs together here in Arkansas for the past 5 years, but I actually met him earlier when he transferred into the Air National Guard. We were both stationed at Little Rock Air Force Base working in different safety offices. Tom started flying in 1997 using money he earned mowing lawns and working on his grandmother's farm. After college, he set his sights on the military and looked into the Navy, but at the time they weren't accepting pilots without 20/20 vision. So he went the civilian route, earning all of his ratings, becoming a CFI, building flight time, and then eventually going to fly corporate in Part 135 charter. But he never gave up on his goal for flying for the military and eventually made it into the Missouri Air National Guard. He later transferred to Arkansas, where he now serves as an instructor and evaluator pilot on the C-130H at the Formal Training Unit. He holds ATP with type ratings in the L-382, which is the C-130, a Boeing 737, and CE-500, commercial privileges in single-engine land, single-engine sea, and multi-engine sea glider, and CFI ratings for airplane single, multi, and instrument. With over 7,000 hours of total flight time, Tom brings a deep and well-rounded perspective to his role as an examiner. Let's get into it. All right, Tom. Well, thanks for joining me today. Like I said at the top, you're a fellow DPE here in Arkansas and give check rides. I think primarily you give check rides here in Arkansas, but have you branched out to other kind of regions of the country?
Every once in a while down in Texas, I am primarily in Arkansas.
Yeah. So you've got a really good aviation background, starting in corporate, and then you did the military thing, which you're still doing now on the C-130s, even though you're flying the old busted C-130s, not the new greatness like I get to. But how long until you have to retire where you can focus on just being a DPE maybe?
5 years.
All right, that's awesome.
Yep.
So what I wanted to do today is start out, this is kind of the first in a series. Really, I don't have a lot of questions for you, but this is going to be a platform for you, and I'd love to hear about some of the things that you're seeing applicants not have prepared well, or maybe maneuvers that they're messing up on frequently, a lot of the administrative stuff that might be getting missed prior to the check ride. So I'm just going to hand it over to you and let you talk about what you're seeing out there day-to-day giving check rides.
Awesome. Thank you, Seth. I appreciate the opportunity because, as you can see, there's a lot of things that happen that aren't really explanatory. So everyone comes to the check ride thinking they're prepared. And unfortunately, many times I've seen they're not. And when I mean they're not prepared, they don't even know what information they're supposed to have. And that's really the CFI's responsibility to make sure they are prepared. And that's why we do the DPE forums. So a lot of the things before we even get to the check ride that I've seen is incomplete documentation. And I hate to be the documentation czar, but it's a legal check ride. And there are items in your logbook that have to be there. So some of the ones that I see, I'll see endorsements that don't have signatures. Some of the other ones, it has a line, just a squiggle line, and that's it. There's no name, there's no number. So what is that? So really following the 6165J will solve a lot of these problems. And then also another one I've seen is old logbooks, and they'll have an old logbook from the oldest, like from the 80s. And they'll say they're prepared for the check ride. And honestly said, I got to look up because I'm like, these numbers don't look right. And it's so old that the endorsement is technically not valid. And so some other ones I've seen is they are ready for the practical tests. Well, who is they? Which practical test? And then I've seen other ones that say they're ready for the multi-engine test. Well, multi-engine what? Like what certificates? So words matter. And I see also on the logbooks, make sure that when you do a cross country, that if it's written down, the identifiers are correct. on the logbook. Also, the distances are correct if distances matter. And then another thing, like, and this is kind of and give you an idea of how in depth we're gonna go. Please don't have an instrument for like an instrument rating where you have to be on an instrument flight plan. Please make sure your airplane is actually IFR certified for the check ride. So I know people are like, wow, that's really looking into it. All that matters. That's all legal items. And as the examiner, I'm verifying all that. And I'm verifying that we can even take a check ride. So that's some of the items I've seen, and then getting into the check ride, starting kind of the knowledge portion, the oral portion of the check ride. One of the things that I've seen, and I think it leads to a lot of both misspeaks and then the wrong information, is being so nervous that as soon as the examiner asks you a question, you just start talking and you say the wrong thing. And then you just keep going and digging and digging. Everything that you say is going to be examined. So answer the question directly. Take a minute to just relax. And if you don't understand the entire question, ask me, because that's the last thing that I want you to do, frankly, is fail. And the last thing that I want you to do is fail because you didn't entirely understand what was asked you. So ask me. Say, can you repeat the question? Or I don't understand the question. Can you elaborate? Because one of the things that's interesting, Seth, in the military terms, we always chair fly what we're going to do. Believe it or not, before I do an examination, I look at the applicant's knowledge test, if a knowledge test is applicable, and I actually chair fly what I'm going to ask them. And I make sure it's very specific. So I don't say, explain to me an electrical system. Oh, well, oh, wow, we could be there for hours, So I might ask, well, what powers the electronics on your aircraft? And be ready for that. Some of the things along the oral portion of the check ride, know how your aircraft systems work. So if you have a super cool G1000, I will ask you about the G1000. And so please know how that works. One of the things that I've seen, we all do it, and I've done it when I've studied, I've caught it. When you study and go over these items, if it's in this, I'll tell you right now, the skills section of the ACS should be you should be highly familiar with it, because I have to ask every skills question. And Seth, and correct if I'm wrong, I've gone through all the skills. If you prepare yourself for the skills, we're going to ask a knowledge question and a risk, but you may not know what knowledge or risk question. If you study the skills, you're going to be ready for that off ball, risk assessment question, or you're going to be ready for the off the wall, knowledge question that comes in. But if your avionics system has AHARS, please know how AHARS works. Please don't just read the first page of the Garmin manual and think that you understand how it works. It's very complex. And so if you tell me that the AHARS is operated by GPS, get ready for me to ask a whole lot more questions. So because we got 10%, you've got 10% of what is happening. And just realize the designated examiners, we want you to succeed and we want you to pass, but you have to know it. And I'm not expecting you to explain to me every principle of rigidity in space. I just expect you to understand roughly how that works, like how your attitude indicator works. And then also I'll probably ask you some signs. So if you have like a G3X and I was like, well, what if the heading is yellow on the heading indicator? I just expect you, or a lot of these questions, if it's a ground-based question, like we're on the ground, I have no problem with you looking it up. You can ask me like, may I look this up? And yes, if it's an advanced question, like a good question is the NTSB. So I say, hey, something happened, how would you get to contact him? And he's like, well, I would look it up. I went, I'm okay with that because you're on the ground. Now, if you're flying along and you're like, I'm going to look up cloud clearance requirements, we're good. We are totally going to be in that cloud, guys. Like, it's like, that's not going to happen. Like, we have to know that. But I'm totally fine with you asking me. So that's one thing I've seen. Know your systems. A lot of times people don't. So and to give you an idea, there's a lot of times I've had students tell me or applicants tell me that the way that their piston engine airplane works, it's through the compression of the cylinders build up pressure, and that's what runs the propeller. And I was like, well, is there anything like how does that happen? So be ready when a question like that, I'm totally going to ask way more information. So be ready for that. And that's telling me when you say it that way, there's probably a disconnect, and really study that.
Yeah, and I think I want to bring up this point now because something you said before kind of caught my ear, and I think there's a balance. So there's the whole idea of like digging yourself a hole, right? We've all heard that term where if you answer a question and it's not the direct, answer to what the DPE is asking you, then that could lead down this rabbit hole and you start digging yourself a hole where it highlights the things that you don't know, right? So there's also, answering a question like that, like how does the engine work? And you start bringing up the pressures within the cylinders and stuff, that could lead down the wrong path. Also the AHRS discussion of, well, how's your AHRS work? And you immediately bring up the GPS. That's going to elicit some more questions from us as the examiner, making sure that you understand that how that system actually does work. But you also don't want to be too concise, I think, in your answers, because if you're too concise, you kind of force us as examiners to keep asking more and more questions. And so and that's why I say it's a balance. So if we look at like area of operation 1 and task G is our operations of systems. I just have the ACS pulled up here. So that ACS, like you were saying, we have to cover one knowledge topic, one risk management, and all the skills. And I think you 100% agree with what you said is just focus on the skills. If you can demonstrate proficiency in those skills, more than likely you're going to also be knowledgeable about the knowledge topics and the risk management topics. But when I ask about a power plant system as an examiner, or or a AHR system, whatever, that we have to talk about the risk management associated with that system, as well as how that system actually operates. So I think this is where a good CFI comes in, where you're doing scenario-based training. So instead of just having that rote knowledge of how AHR systems work, like that's the foundational knowledge. But what you practice with your CFI is learning the modes of failure of that AHRS and how you're going to fly if that AHRS fails, how you're going to know if that AHRS has failed, like what type of flags are you going to get on the PFD or the HSI or, whatever is appropriate there. And then how are you going to operate the aircraft and get it on the ground safely after some of that, something like that failure occurs. So I think if you were to ask about AHRS and you have an applicant that comes back and says, well, yeah, the AHRS is really important. Here's the gauges, here's the instrumentation that AHRS runs. Here's some modes of failure, and kind of starts going into this basically discussion format of how the AHRS could fail, what they're going to do if the AHRS fails, and bring the aircraft, bring it to a safe conclusion, basically, which is their ultimate goal as a PIC, is be able to take an emergency or system failure or malfunction and not have that turn into a bad outcome where they bend metal or hurt somebody. So I think you would agree there. If you're asking about that, try to work that in, or practice at least with your CFI of working in the risk management aspect of all of those skills, and don't just have the rote, the rote level of knowledge of a system or a procedure. You really want that whole picture.
Yeah. So Agree. So, man, you brought up an excellent point. So, if they did that and they told me what they're going to do when the AHRS fails, this is how I know it failed. This is what I'm going to do. They've actually covered so much more, and they're telling me they can actually operate this piece of equipment safer. And yeah, no, we would be totally fine if they're like, yeah. So AHRS, man, it's rigidity in space. Really cool, super cool, potentiometers, solenometers, vibrating magnets, right? But really what that pains me, this is how I know when it failed. So this is what I have to do. These are the backup instruments that I have, and this is how, they work. And this is what I'm looking at. We're good. We are totally good because you just showed me yeah, and you've actually showed inoperative what to do with inoperative equipment. Like, so yes, we would totally be cool if someone went through that and just showed me an application level. And yeah, yeah, everything would be fine on that type of portion.
Yeah, because I'm trying to dispel that a little bit because I think what I tell people is don't be a victim of the check ride, and I feel like a lot of applicants come down and they're super nervous. They sit down in front of you. They don't want to they don't want to speak unless spoken to. They don't want to answer anything incorrectly, and they're almost afraid to talk. And I'm like having to drag the information out of them, and that can be kind of difficult, and it's stressful for both of us, right? So I don't want applicants to be scared to show that they have that pilot and command level of knowledge. So, don't be worried about giving a big picture kind of answer to a simple question necessarily. But like I said, that's why there's a balance. You could talk too much and start bringing up stuff that is maybe unrelated, and that causes us, that we kind of peak up. Our interest peaks when something gets brought up that's totally unrelated because we're like, wait, is there a fundamental misunderstanding here? So, you want to stay on target, but you do want to try to answer it in a way a pilot in command would answer it and not just somebody that's learning how to fly. And I find myself getting a lot of those student pilot level answers rather than a pilot in command level answer. So anyway, I just wanted to throw that out there.
Yeah, there's a lot of that, and that's exactly what I'm looking forward to is, this applicant able to be in charge of the airplane if something went wrong. And some of the I've seen it, like, when flying, that I've seen people pick a field that I wouldn't pick, but they did a great job. They did a great job setting up to land and, like, an engine failure, and that's fine. That's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for, yeah, people taking charge. I've actually had an applicant, and that she thought that she failed, but she saved us all. She was landing, and a guy cut her off and took off on another runway, and she actually went around the person, and she's like, "Well, sorry, I guess I failed." I'm like, "For what? For saving our lives?" Like, you did great. Like, you did awesome. So I'm looking for that. And that is and it's kind of interesting when they do make a command decision, many times like that, they're like second guess, like, "Oh man, I literally I went to the left and went around on the run." I'm like, "Great. Yeah, you totally got cut off and you didn't exacerbate the problem by continuing. You saw what was happening and you made a decision and stuff." And that was a perfect example. The person like, "Well, it's right traffic." I'm like, sidestepping to the left on final so you don't hit an airplane is totally allowed. Like, that is you're totally cool. So I'm looking for that. I'm totally looking for that. I said, great job. Great job there. That you are keeping us safe. And that's what I'm looking for. So yeah, as long as they're showing me, and I've had people, they'll say something wrong. But if they, one of the things too, if they say something wrong, but they're able able to back it up, or like, "Hey, this is what I would do." We just debrief it. We just talk about it, and just go from there. So I'm looking for a command decision that doesn't lead into other problems. Like, I've had people on a I've had know what the ACS says. I've had people on a short field landing, do a go around. They're like, "Well, we'll make this one a full stop." And I was like, "Well, it says that if you're not in your landing zone and you weren't, you'd go around. You went around.
Right.
It's like, we're good to go. Like, so know that, and that's what I'm looking for.
Yeah, and also one of the tasks you have to evaluate is a go around.
Yeah,
So,
that's a perfect example.
I
Yeah,
mean, when a go around kind of organically happens during the check ride, that's not really a bad thing.
Well,
The the power off 180 on the commercial ride being the exception of that,
yeah,
with the new guidance there. But even there, that's not a clean kill like disapproval, because if the go around was for safety flight kind of outside your control, then even that is allowed. And I think you would agree with me, even on the power off 180, I would much rather see you
yes,
bite the bullet and make the decision to go around rather than try to force an unsafe approach down just because a go around might result in you failing the check ride. Um,
100%.
yeah, that still shows, like you said before, we're looking for good decision makers, like the monkey skills of flying the airplane. We could literally teach a monkey how to fly an airplane. Um, what we can't teach, and what's more difficult to um, implement, is that decision making. And so that's ultimately what I think you're saying we evaluate, is your ability to go out there, command the aircraft, make decisions, and do so safely.
Yes. So, Seth, I feel, and this is just my opinion. So say that happens. So say you go out there on the power off 180 and you see an aircraft and it don't look like they're stopping and you're like, nope, we are going around. I can defend that. I can defend that with the FAA because an unsafe situation has occurred. I did not have to intervene. You are the pilot in command and you made a decision based on what was actually happening to keep us safe. Man, we're good.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
cool. Yeah. So,
Yeah. So I'm going to review real quick, just for everybody listening, kind of some of the things you talked about, maybe give some resources. So we started out not being prepared. That's also something that I see. Man, I wish I did a better job tracking how many non-starts or false starts I have on check rides that either make it all the way to the day of the check ride and we find something that's disqualifying, or maybe cancel just a couple days prior because they've discovered something that isn't there properly. And it could be an endorsement, like you said, the resources for your endorsement. Your CFI needs to be using the current advisory circular 6165J. And so that's your certification of pilots, flight instructors, and ground instructors. That has all the sample endorsements there. So you mentioned, having endorsements that don't have the applicant's name, and I've seen that too, and it's hilarious because it's like, I don't know who this endorsement is for. This could be an endorsement for anyone, right? It has to have your name on it. Missing CFI signatures. Maybe the endorsement is they're using the old endorsements that are in the logbook, which I think is what you were saying, is those endorsements are so old, they no longer meet the requirements that's in 6165J. So like if you went out and bought a Sporties or a Gleim flight training, and it came with a logbook, and let's say this is 10 years ago, those pre-made endorsements in the back, those are no longer valid. So your CFI, needs to be aware of that. So that 6165J, make sure the endorsements match with that. The other thing is, for the new airman certification standards, there is an ACS companion guide for pilots. And so that practical test checklist is on page 19 of that companion guide. So you can go to the FAA's website and search for that. It's in section 7 of the ACS companion guide. It used to be inside of the ACS, but what that is basically a good checklist for you to go through with your CFI to make sure that you have all of the correct documents that you need for the aircraft. And then, of course, your logbook and medical and all that stuff. We want to make sure, you mentioned the distances of the different cross countries that you're doing. Man, that hurts me even when I show up to a check ride and somebody's doing a check ride that's like, or a cross country, quote unquote, that's 49 nautical miles. And you're like, this doesn't count. I'm sorry. There's really nothing I can do. And that may sound crazy. It's like, well, it's just 1 mile, but it's the law, and I really can't change that, And what people have to remember is when we're there as examiners, we're representing the FAA. So even though we're not FAA employees, we're representing the administrator, and we're basically we are. You have to treat us as if we were the FAA, and the law is the law. Like, that's the hard line. Fortunately, that's all stuff that's pretty easy to scrub before the check ride. The other endorsement that I'll bring up, I'm curious to see if you've seen this, but a missing 90-day endorsement. So that 90-day solo endorsement for student pilots, man, that's probably the most common missing endorsement. I don't know, is that your experience?
Yes. So the solo endorsement, yeah, I've seen it where they don't have any 90-day endorsements, and yeah, and the member soloed in like 2017. So that's a problem. It's a real problem that at that point we can't solve. And it's sad, but the documents do matter. And stuff, you hit it, it's law. Like, a lot of times we don't think about it, but it's an actual law. Like, we can't, and we as designated we can't break it. So if it's something that can't be fixed, we're done. And it's sad. And it breaks my heart sometimes when these people are preparing and they think it's ready. And I was like, hey, where's your 90-day solo endorsement? They're like, oh no, I soloed a couple years ago. I'm like, yes. Well, where's the 90-day solo endorsement for here? They're like, what are you talking about? I'm like, is your instructor around? No, they're in New York. I'm
Yeah.
like, well,
we're
So-
at an impasse there.
Yeah.
Another thing you brought up is the written test results. So if you're taking a check ride that requires a written test, then you're going to get an airman knowledge test report. And on that airman knowledge test report, you're going to have these codes, and those codes line up exactly with the ACS for the practical test that you're going to take. So let's say you're preparing for the private, you would go to the private pilot ACS, and you would look in the knowledge topic areas, and all the private knowledge topics start with PA. So I think that stands for private airplane. And then the next numeric, so there's a decimal, is the area of operation. And so a lot of the knowledge topics are in area of operation 1. And then the next designator would be the task. So for instance, area of operation 1, task A is pilot qualifications, so that you know what page to go to. And then you need to actually highlight that knowledge topic. If I were you as an applicant, I would go in and highlight all of the knowledge error codes that I missed on the test and make sure that I can speak to all of those intelligently, because as examiners, we have to ask each one of those things. And we can ask it in addition to what we're planning on asking to begin with, or we can ask it, in place of that. And what I mean by that is we have to ask at least one knowledge topic, at least one risk management item, and then all of the skills. So we could use the knowledge code that you missed as our one knowledge topic, or we could add it to, and I think you'll agree there, Tom, I very rarely ask only one knowledge topic. We wind up covering probably most of them in some cases, maybe with the exception of like weather or systems. But we're going to wind up asking 3 or 4 at the very least usually. So
usually follow-ons for me or in there. But yes, I'll ask more. Kind of along those lines, and I do want to say, Seth, you're talking about risk and then like knowledge questions. So if you tell me something of how you are fundamentally going to operate, like say as a private pilot, so if you give me a personal minimum of 7 statute miles and no lower than 2,500 feet with a crosswind of 10 knots, please do not go out to the airplane when it's 1,505 miles and we have a 20-knot crosswind. Man, it's your personal minimums. And so when you go to the airplane, you're telling me you can handle that. In that scenario, we're not going. But what's going to happen is it's for decision making and for not following your personal minimums, that is unsatisfactory. So if you tell me how you're going to operate, you need to operate that way. So one of the things I've seen too with these personal minimums, you need to talk with your instructor and you need to get some personal minimums for you. I've everyone says, well, my flight school's minimums, or here, hang on, let me go find it. Okay, so if it's your personal minimums, you need to know them. Like you don't need to go, let me go get this book that someone told me this should be my minimums. You need to have them, and it needs to be applicable. So I've seen some, and set the pretty extreme. Like I've seen one where they would accept 1,000 feet and 4 statute miles, and then I've seen a crosswind. I'll accept 19 knots. I'm not accepting 19 knots at 172. Like, I mean, that's amazing. Like, and then that will lead on to questions like, so what is the demonstrated crosswind component? Another one, 1,000 feet. Why is that? So I'm gonna start asking questions. So be ready for that. And one of the things too with that, I know people want to get their check ride done, but don't push the weather. Don't push things that you can't control. And that will also, because if you do, I can see it, Seth, I know you can see it, and we know if this is safe or not. So if you try to push the weather, a good thing is pop up thunderstorms. I had someone cancel today because of the possibility. Straight up, that's a good decision. If you don't know what's going to happen, I wouldn't do a check ride. So it's not a good decision to be lining up for a runway and we see a giant rain shaft out here and you're like, okay, here we go. No, here we don't go.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, I've
so
actually had that happen where we're on the runway and I'm trying to allow them every opportunity to make the no-go decision. And we line up on the runway, and as soon as they add power, I said, my controls, and I taxi us off the runway. And I'm like, I'm sorry, that's a disapproval. It was an unsafe decision for you to go. You're violating like 3 of your personal minimums we talked about on the ground, and basically ignored them. And it's like, that's unsatisfactory. Not only was it unsafe, but it was beyond, well beyond your personal minimums. So yeah, I 100% agree with you there. There's a lot of resources out there for you to document your personal minimums, have them written down. And man, it's covered in every single ACS in one of the risk management items. Usually it's the weather, could be pilot qualifications, depending on the rating. So when it gets to that, I would have them, I would hand that sheet of paper to the DPE and say, well, here's my personal minimums right here. And that's what I love to see. And again, it's like you said, it's not just, well, I use what the school uses, or I use the FARs, the FAR minimums. I'm like, well, that doesn't really cover everything, So,
no, no.
Yeah, 100%. I agree. Personal minimums are a big deal. I'd like to get your opinion on this because I asked this on the Discord channel and we talked about it on a couple podcasts ago. But let's say you have an applicant that has personal minimums of, say, 10 knots, 10 knot crosswind. And, the plane's max demonstrated crosswind limit is 15 knots, and the winds are gusting to 12. How would you expect the applicant to handle that?
I'd expect them to bring it up, and it's getting close. So I'd watch how they handled this, and watch how they would handle gusts. A lot of times people frankly, they don't handle gusts, and they don't bring it up. So I'd like to know, and yeah, man, I'd watch to see what happened. I would let them do it, and I would watch and make sure we didn't get slow, and make sure that, yeah, we didn't lose any airspeed. But one of the questions I'd probably ask, like, so what's the hazard with having gusty winds? So man, I'm kind of bad about this. When I start seeing something happen, I ask, and I hate to give my tail and poker, but I start asking questions. Like, I start like we do. We have it's getting gusty, and our plane's moving around, and I'm like, so can you tell me what the hazards are with the thunderstorm? I mean, and so I'm trying to get an idea, and I am totally cool until our FAA manager says something. I'm totally cool with them looking around and like, wow, it's really gusty today, and it looks really rainy out there right off the end of the runway. Hey, I really think that we should probably go check the weather. I'm totally cool with that. But kind of to your scenario, man, because it was within inside his limits, the winds weren't outside. I'd just see how it goes. And I, yeah, but I'd ask questions about gusts and how is that going to affect your airplane?
Yeah, when I was thinking about it, I was like, well, my ideal answer, and I guess the core of the question is, should should an applicant, because check rides are what they are, they're hard to schedule. You got to get the stars aligned to get everything there. And so you're the day of, everything else is good. You're just worried about these gusts. Your personal minimums would tell you to cancel.
So I
Uh,
missed, did you say it was within inside your personal minimums?
well, the personal minimums are 10. So, but they don't really handle
Oh,
gusts there. So it's gusting above 12.
oh, Seth, no, I misunderstood.
So
I thought it was inside the personal minimums. I
no, no,
missed that.
no. And
Okay,
this is
no.
the discussion of like, would I be okay with somebody saying, "Hey, I realize my personal minimums coming into this check ride are 10. It's gusting to 12. I'm willing to go out and attempt to handle these gusts, but the risk management I have in place is there's another field that's within, well within our reserve fuel range, that has a runway that's aligned. So if it exceeds my capability to land the airplane, I'm going to make the decision to divert to that airfield
Oh,
during the
yeah.
check ride." And I was
Mhm.
like, I think that would be, I, I think you're showing me a couple different things there. You're showing me that, you're not just blatantly violating your personal minimums. You're putting a risk management kind of tool in place to
Yeah.
handle that should it exceed your capabilities. And it brings up the topic of, well, are gusts something that you handle in your personal minimums? Because I think a lot of times that's just kind of talking about steady state winds. Um, but maybe you could put steady state is at 10 with up to a 3 to 4 knot gust. But if you are going to try to go with that gust factor, you need to have a plan to go to another field and carry enough fuel to make it to that divert field, to where you don't put yourself in a, basically we don't want you to put yourself in a position where we have to take over the airplane as the examiner to land, because that's going to be an automatic disapproval.
It is. Yeah, man, I'd be cool with that if they told me that. Now I would bring it up, Seth. You being in the military, me being in the military, we do the departure alternates. And I will say, have you noticed though, we have these ideas. We're like, okay, yeah, if the weather's bad, if something goes wrong, we're going here. And you take off and that happens. Everyone is so bummed that they're doing this. They're like, oh my goodness, we're actually going somewhere else. We're actually flying now without an engine in the weather, going to this is horrible. I do not want to
Yeah.
do this. And so, so just be aware of, if you start adding your contingency plans, you have to make yourself do it. And you have to make yourself follow the contingency plans. I've seen people have contingency plans that are like, yeah, this happened. Yeah, I'm not doing that. Well, then it doesn't work.
It's not
So
really a contingency.
it's not
Yeah,
contingency.
but
Yeah.
the point is, man, I love that you brought up personal minimums. First of all, you have to have personal minimums coming into the check ride. It's demanded by the ACS, so we're going to have to talk about them. Second of all, if the weather's exceeding that, bite the bullet and cancel the check ride. Say, hey, the weather is beyond my personal minimums. I just can't fly today. And if that happens before you step to the airplane, so be it. If that happens the day before the check ride, sounds like your applicant today, they canceled before y'all even started, right?
Absolutely. Actually, Seth, I have no problem. I tell them, you can call me at 2 in the morning, and I've had someone call me at 4, and yeah, absolutely. Just realize if I answer the phone, it may be a minute before I know what's happening, but no, I'm totally cool with that, and there's no charge. If I show up the day of and like because I've prepared and I'm there, there is a cancellation fee. So call me beforehand. I'll tell them wherever I'm going, I'll actually tell them like, hey, it takes me 30 minutes to get to the airfield. So if I need to be there at 7, call me before 6:30. We're all good. Everything's cool. And it is, and it's telling me that they're prepared and they know what's happening. Oh,
Yeah, and I think I wish there was like some standard operating procedures for examiners, because what I sympathize with these students that wait maybe 2 months for a check ride, and then the day comes for the check ride, and the weather is going to force them to cancel, and there's this pressure to get it done. And they know that, well, if I cancel, this DPE is going to put me in the back of the line. I'm going to have to wait another 2 months. So here you are, 4 months, maybe waiting on a check ride because of a weather cancellation. So it sounds like you kind of have similar policy as me, where we try to build some holes in our schedule to handle cancellations that we know we just know that those are going to happen. And sometimes the weather is just terrible. This year has been kind of the worst weather year for me as an examiner. I think I've canceled somewhere around 50% of all of my scheduled check rides this year, so it's been tough. But you're knowing your DPE's cancellation policy beforehand, that can be helpful. So that you just know what the expectations are.
Yeah, Seth, and that's straight up, if you are doing something correct, like if you're making decisions correctly for the safety of you and everyone for your airplane, I'm going to work with you. So, and that's straight up with, say the day's beautiful and you come out and do a check ride and you come out and there's just thunderstorms everywhere. It was not forecasted. I am going to work with you. Frankly, I will not charge an applicant that makes a good decision that if they didn't could lead to a failure. I will work with you to get you in as quick as I can. And I don't charge them. I don't charge them for a discontinuance that was out of their control because they frankly made the right decision.
Yeah,
and
same.
So,
I don't charge for discontinuances, and mainly because I don't, I feel like that's maybe a little, it's problematic because now you're charging them money to make a safe decision, basically, and that's,
yeah.
that's the part that I feel a little bad about. So I just don't do it. And, it's just part of aviation. It's a compromise. And,
I have a good story, Seth. If I don't think the lady would mind me saying, so a mom called me out on that. So when I first started, if I came out, I charged, and this kid made a great decision. One of the, basically it's an arm that holds on the cowling was literally sticking out the side of the airplane. And so the airplane was unairworthy. And he called it. And I'm like, okay, yeah, man, I'll come back, charge 400. And his mom calls. Is like, hey, I just want to ask, so he found a problem. If he would have took the airplane, would you have failed him? I'm like, I would. Yeah, absolutely. And so she's like, so he legally did what was correct. I'm like, he totally did. And she goes, then why would you charge him to come back for making the right decision? I'm like, that's an excellent. Well, the way that you say that that's perfect. You're totally right. And so I'm not. And so ever since then, I've not charged because that lady was 100% correct. You're making a right decision. Frankly, you're making a legal decision. And yeah, I'm not going to hold that against you.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good policy. And it is a true compromise because that's still time out of our schedule. That we can't get other, because we all have kind of other jobs that we could be doing to earn income. And so now we've essentially used up another spot where we can't book another check ride. So I get it from the DP's standpoint, but that's why I think it's a compromise. Now that is also a reason why I think one of the reasons why DPE prices are what they are is because there's no guarantee, there's no pay protection, in other words, for when we book a day to do check rides. So that means when we do charge for a check ride, we have to kind of bake that into the price a little bit to make it worth our while to even do this job, which takes there's a lot of planning that goes into this. There's a lot of time out of our day. It isn't just the check ride where we're working and earning there, so.
Yeah.
That's a good point. Well, let's move on to some maneuvers. We talked about some maneuvers, but a lot of stuff on the ground, which I think is unfortunate because that's kind of the easiest stuff to prepare for. And there's a lot of resources to get ready for the ground. But now let's get to the air side of things. So this is the actual monkey skills, right? The stick and rudder flying. What are you seeing applicants struggle with on the check ride?
I see them struggling with pilotage and dead reckoning and setting up the admin stuff as well. So please have your nav log out. Don't have it in a backpack. Don't have it back.
Oh yeah, that's my favorite. Yeah.
Yeah.
So Yeah, so, what you're talking about is actually covered in Area of Operation 1, Task D is our cross-country flight planning. So we'll cover this in the oral. And what I've seen the same exact thing happen where we cover the nav log in the ground, and then the nav log gets put away. But remember, that nav log is going to have to come back out because we're actually going to use it in Area of Operation 6, which is a flight portion of the check ride. So that nav log is going to be used twice during the check ride. It will be used once during the ground where we're evaluating your ability to plan. And then you're going to have to use that nav log and a map to do pilotage and dead reckoning, which is, again, Area of Operation 6, Task A, is our pilotage and dead reckoning. So you need to have access to that. And boy, is that frustrating when we get airborne and the nav log isn't, like, I look over it, I don't see a nav log anywhere. And it's in a backpack back there. And I don't know about your plan of action. My plan of action, that's usually the first task that we do. We take off and pretend like we're going on our cross country. And so usually it's somewhere around the engine run up is complete. I'm like, hey, we're navigating using pilotage and dead reckoning. So just so you know, the GPS is inoperative. You can't use the moving map on ForeFlight. And I think that's what you're getting at, is they're not prepared for that aspect of it.
No, they're not. So yeah, with instructors, practice that. Practice actually doing that because you're saying they can. And guys, we can get into this debate about not having GPS, but really it's part of like the private pilot check ride for a cross country plan, do a pilot and dead reckoning that you need to know how to do it.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah,
so
you have to. Yeah, Area of Operation 6 Task A Skill 2 is navigate by pilotage, which doesn't involve a GPS. So that's a skill you have to demonstrate. And then, again, that's kind of like the law aspect, the 49 nautical mile cross country versus the 50. Like it's the law. The skill is what we have to evaluate, and we have to evaluate pilotage.
yes. Yeah, so man, some of the more maneuvers that I've seen, it's okay to if you get off heading or your altitude and you get back on it. I'm actually looking for that, so be diligent with that. So steep turns have always relative been good from what I've seen for the private pilot, the commercial. Oh, the stalls. Please know what is expected of you on the stalls based on your ACS. So, yeah, do you need to do a full stall? Do you need to do the first indications? And then slow flight, please slow to the slowest speed. Like some people do these shuffles where we fly around at 90, then we fly around at 80, then we fly around at 70. I just need to see what the ACS says. So, oh, and one thing I've seen for all these, please clear the area. Always clear the area. I've had people like start looking around and you could tell they're like, man, I see an airplane here, but I don't want to stop this maneuver. I'm looking for you to stop the maneuver. Assume that I see the airplane and I see what's happening. And I am sitting here, because you start the maneuver and you set up and you stay away from the airplane. That's frankly what I'm looking for, and stuff with that. So I've seen that, know how to fly for like the private pilot, please know what to do if you get into IMC. So many times people are like, well, I'm just going to immediately descend. I was like, oh no, please don't. Man, it will take questions. I'm like, so is there anyone that could help you here? It takes like 3 or 4 questions to contact ATC. I'll tell you right now, from what I've seen in my research, Seth, correct me if I'm wrong, the people that have survived this have called ATC and they know what to do, frankly, and they will watch you and they will make sure, frankly, you're doing it. And then if you do have to descend, now they are putting you in an area to do it and they are watching you. And man, and I've had someone like, well, so you're saying I get in the weather and I call them, and I just lose my license? Yes, because you'll die. Like, yeah, absolutely.
And yeah, that's a great point. What I see that I don't like is the descent. Boy, is that terrible, because you don't know where you're at. You can't know that there may be a terrain or obstacles below you. So don't descend. Please don't descend if you get an IMC. And the other thing that I bring up, and usually this is a debrief point because a lot of the private pilots immediately start a 180-degree turn. when I tell them, hey, you've flown into IMC, what do you do? And they immediately go into a turn. And that's not necessarily incorrect, but we do debrief it. And the reason I debrief it, I don't know your thoughts on this, but my thought is if you're not instrument rated and you find yourself in IMC, the first thing you should do is probably just maintain straight and level and not put yourself in a turn, which could seriously turn into a spiral really quickly if you're not trained. And a lot of the inadvertent weather penetrations happen, I think, they're more insidious. It's not like you've flown into a cloud. It's more like you're flying around, maybe the visibility is like 5 miles, and the visibility slowly deteriorates until it's basically nothing. And maybe you've been IMC for a few minutes. So maybe a 180-degree turn isn't going to immediately put you out of this weather. So yeah, I think you're 100% correct there. Straight and level, confess, talk to ATC. If anything, climb maybe, but just maintain altitude heading, wings level, contact ATC. If you're not on flight following, go to 121.5. Yeah. Get some help immediately because that is going to save your life. And you're not going to lose your license over that. It's not like you intentionally did it. You went out and you had a problem. The FAA is going to work with you there. They're not going to just come in and pull your license. So
Exactly. And you did the right thing. You're like, something happened and you confessed. And yes, you get on 121.5. All those guys that meow on that frequency will totally help you out. They will get you they will get you to the right frequency. Somebody will help you.
Yeah, there's always somebody on 121.5. So all right. How about what are you seeing on stalls? Man, I've beat that up. Yeah, the stalls. Well, the way I'm expecting you to do the stall, don't do the phases and don't do a specific speed. I'm actually expecting you to slow the airplane down until I hear kind of just the beginnings of that stall horn chirp, and then add power to get right above that, because then I know we're truly at the slow flight speed. That's what the ACS tells us to. So just slowing to an arbitrary 60 knots, that's slow-ish speed, but that may not be actually slow flight. So I don't know if you're seeing that, but that's definitely something to run into.
Yeah, and that's the one thing, and I think from what I've seen, they do not want that horn to go off because they're basically, oh no, I've got to the horn. Well, you're seeing where your speed is, and then also the one things that I look for, man, we're good if the horn goes off and you immediately correct for it, and then now you're sitting at airspeed and you can fly that speed. You're telling me that you could do this. You're telling me that you can do slow flight, and you know that horn is telling you something's bad.
Absolutely.
I'm looking for that.
Yeah, and it's actually in, so if you're the private pilot, it's in the commercial as well for the ACS. But page 76 of the private pilot, it has the maneuvering during slow flight, and it specifically says that a momentary activation doesn't constitute unsatisfactory performance as long as you add power. You don't just holding the stall horn on. So a momentary activation, completely fine. So that's the slow flight problem. How about emergency procedures? Are you seeing some deficiencies in how applicants are handling emergency procedures?
Yes, if it's a multi-engine and you actually have to shut down the engine, use the checklist. Use the checklist. Now with that said, I've had people use the checklist and they've actually I've had someone miss an item on the checklist and I still passed them because what they did was correct. It was humorous, but it was correct. They didn't know what part of the checklist they missed. So they grabbed this giant book for this Comanche, threw it on my lap and said, go to the page I tell you to. And I'm like, okay, yeah, I'm looking for that. So did not have to be there. Like I was literally in his way. And so he figured out, he got into the book. He figured out what part of the checklist he was missing. He forgot to turn the magneto back on when he shut it down.
Yeah.
So, but he figured it out. But with that said, a lot of times they won't use the checklist. They'll miss something. And then and then I have to intervene. The reason why I tell that story there, I did not have to intervene. He figured something was out, but that's when he went to the checklist. And what happened was he was not used to going through the regular checklist, that he missed an item and thought everything was okay. So really make sure you know your checklist and that you're checking it. You're going to be busy. You're going to be stressed, and it is a checklist, but you need to know what's on it. Man, I'd kind of I'd chair fly all those checklists. I would know where every item is, especially if it is a applicable item, meaning it's only applicable in certain situations that you know that as well. So because I've seen a lot of not using checklists, because yeah, you have an engine failure or on a single engine, like, I'm gonna give you a scenario. We have to have it scenario based. So I'm gonna give you a scenario and I'm gonna watch what you're doing. So if I give you a engine fire, please don't go through the restart checklist, you know?
Yeah.
So yeah, so be ready for that. I'm gonna see that you can apply where you are and what type of emergency and stuff. I'm totally fine with using acronyms to help you get to your checklist. GUMPS check is awesome. I look for that, but then I'm still looking that you check to make sure you know where the gear is. That's something too. If you guys bring a complex airplane, be ready to actually do like an engine failure. Like, I'm going to ask you if that prop is just all that drag. I'm going to ask about it. Like, could we? What's with this blue lever? Anything we can do here? You know, so be ready for that. Be ready. I love the arrow. I love doing check rides in the arrow. Be ready for that to either override the gear or something. If it's not messing with you, know your airplane and your checklist with the emergency procedures. Yes,
Yeah.
to answer your question, long story long, Seth. Yes, I've seen a few things.
Yeah. I'll also bring up the new ACS that came out last year also added skill 3 to area of operation. I think this is area of operation 9, which is your emergency procedures, emergency equipment. But task D there is emergency equipment and survival gear.
Uh-huh.
Skill 3 is simulate ballistic parachute deployment procedures if equipped, and that's a skill. So if you're taking a check ride in an aircraft like a Cirrus that's equipped with a ballistic parachute, part of our plan of action as examiners is to actually force you to, you have to demonstrate the simulated use of that ballistic parachute system. So that's kind of a new one that's been added relatively recently. But yeah, and what I'll add to what you were saying was like, I had a similar instance where somebody ran a checklist incorrectly. They couldn't get the engine restarted. I didn't wind up giving them a disapproval for checklist usage because they eventually found it. But the problem was while they were troubleshooting, we lost 500 feet and we got like 30 degrees off heading. And that's what I failed them for, is because we didn't maintain aircraft control while you were troubleshooting this emergency. So make sure you're flying the airplane. If you just maintain aircraft control and you can maintain altitude, or if you're engine out, at least maintain the direction where you're going to do the forced landing. In the case of a single, if you're in a multi, if you're above drift down speed, you might be losing some altitude. In this case, we were well below our absolute ceiling, so we could have maintained altitude. We just weren't. And then we weren't maintaining heading at all. So that's another case that could cause a failure is we give you this emergency, and while you're running the checklist, you stop flying the airplane. Yeah, I've had this happen on the navigation section where I tell them to tune in a VOR, and they're having trouble with it, and we wind up getting off heading and altitude.
Yeah.
If it takes you 15 minutes to find the VOR, I'm not going to fail you for that. But if you lose control of the aircraft while you're doing it, then that's grounds for disapproval.
100%. So yeah, Seth, real quick, one thing, you're talking about the emergency equipment. I've seen this before. If you do have it on your plane, you're totally right. We are going to talk about it, but some of the things I've seen people not use it and they still have the flags in. So like the jettison. So kind of from where I'm coming from, military background, and correct me if I'm wrong, you do not take off an airplane with flags hanging off of emergency equipment. Like that is highly frowned upon.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, the only pin that should be in, like if you're flying a Cirrus, the only pin that should be in regularly is the pin in the fire extinguisher.
yeah, there you go.
But the pin, and if you have a ballistic parachute with the T handle, like that
Mhm.
pin needs to be pulled unless the system is inoperative. And if the system is inoperative, that brings up other certification issues. It depends on the aircraft. Some aircraft can fly with it inoperative, but the Cirrus, for instance, cannot. That's part of the airworthiness requirements, which brings up a whole other conversation.
Whole other conversation.
Yeah.
Yep.
So just, I'm giving a little bit more check rides in the Cirrus aircraft, and that ballistic parachute system does bring up some additional topics to be prepared to cover both in the oral and in flight.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, any other things you'd like to cover? Man, you've covered a lot of ground. I like what we've talked about so far. Anything you'd like to follow up with?
Well, thank you, Seth. Not really, because I would say if you're willing to do it, probably do more of these, because yes, we could go on for hours on this type of stuff. Man, I'll just summarize: be pilot in command, follow the ACS, and things will be fine. You're going to make mistakes, but if you are commanding them, frankly, we're good. Like if you're telling me how a door works and you say the wrong thing or you get the wrong latch, man, we're good. Like, as long as you correct it, like a door doesn't fall off or something of that nature, we're fine. And relax on your check ride. One of the things is I don't think people spend as much time with their CFI, and I know CFIs probably won't want to hear this. Annoy your CFI, meaning if you don't know how to do something, you go to your CFI until they do it. Even if they charge you, which they probably will, it is a business. It's totally worth going through and them charging you, and then you having to take another check ride.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I agree with that for sure. So, and then I'll always say this: get a good night's rest beforehand. Don't stay up late studying, because man, coming into a check ride not well rested and just feeling bad, that's really a good way to make some poor decisions and have a bad outcome. All right, well, Tom, I really appreciate your time. Maybe we'll do this again, but this is you're the first episode, so I'm excited about getting this out there and hearing what folks have to say about it.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Seth. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Tom. We'll see you.
See you.